revisited before even a decision is ever made when to execute. So a lot of times they'll sit in there for 10 years and then they say your case might be up for a review for an appeal or whatever. So, you know, a lot of times when they get the appeal, then their sentence is less than that the appeal, but by law, they are required an appeal before that.
More than one. I'll get to that when we get over to that side of the board. No, that's a good point. Okay. So, any questions about Stephen Nathanson? He doesn't mind locking people up for life. His argument is sanctity of life, right to life, and if we act like the killers, then what distinguishes us from them other than the law gives us the right to take a life? And he says life does not depend on the law, once again. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The third one and last one I want to bring it to is Hugo Adam Badeau. This is a really interesting argument. It's called the analogy from self-defense. Capital punishment is to society what self-defense is to the individual. In other words, if the individual can protect themselves, then society can do it too. You have a right to defend yourself. You don't have to become fodder to someone else's malicious intent. Okay? If we accept the fact that the individual can defend themselves, then society can too. Society protects itself against individuals who don't respect other people's right to life. So that's his argument, okay? Most people agree it would not be morally wrong and even may be our moral duty to use violence to prevent aggression directed against either ourselves or innocent third parties, self-defense, concern for the well-being of others, and so does justice. Legally, escape has traditionally been required as the first line of defense. That changes in 2005. Florida leads the country in what was originally called the Castle Law, which meant you had the right to defend yourself in your home, and now it's evolved into what we call stand your ground. Not just your home, your place of work, your car, even your person on the street. But it's not unlimited, and most people don't understand that. 33 states have either stand your ground or castle laws. Some of them want to reduce the severity of what you can use for a defense, and others are thinking maybe of eliminating, but right now there's 33. What the law says is you have the right to use deadly force when faced with imminent danger. The word imminent then is key. I've talked to judges about this and lawyers. The word imminent is key. What does the word imminent mean? The word imminent means now. So you're coming at me with a gun. Foolish person. Pow, 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 and you're dead. Imminent danger. You threaten to kill me is not imminent danger. It has to be danger now with deadly force. Okay? So in the daytime and the nighttime, we have to distinguish. I'm sleeping in the crib at 2 o'clock in the morning and you come breaking in. I do not have to ask you for ID or justification why you're breaking into my home. I'm allowed to use, I have a right to assume that you're there to do me at least great bodily damage, if not, and I can use deadly force. You may still go to court, but you have a greater protection. In the daytime, that's where things are up for grabs. Imminent danger is the key. So you come up to me, and you say, I'm gonna, now, to you this is a pen. To me this is a deadly weapon. I won't show you. If you're military trained, this is a very deadly weapon. But you have to know how to use it. So, daytime, how do we adjudicate this? How do we decide what's imminent and what isn't? And all the lawyers and the judges I've talked to said, don't be surprised if they turn you over to a jury to decide. Now, if it's obvious, someone's trying to kill me, knife, whatever, no questions asked. But if there's all shady area in there, they're not going to make that decision. They're going to turn it over to a jury because you have a right to a jury of your peers to decide if you violated the law or not. Nevertheless, the argument that Hugo Adam Badeau builds on is you have a right to defend yourself. How much force are you allowed to use? And the old law used to be, it was called the police rule of law. The force that's being used against you is the force you have or you can use to defend yourself. Rules of engagement, military, but let's leave military. That's okay, that's okay. So you have a right to do that. Okay, well that makes sense, okay? But then this is the heart of his argument, the analogy from self-defense. He says, let's say that we incapacitate a murderer. Well, no. He may not know how to still do it, but let's just say he doesn't. He's incapacitated. Then Bedeau says, okay, so once we've incapacitated a killer who no longer has the capacity to kill, then, and I use he because it would be 3% of the time it would be she, then that person no longer has the capacity to kill, so what's my justification for killing him? Once I lock them up, they no longer can kill. It's an interesting argument. What would be the justification for killing a killer that we have incapacitated so they can't kill anymore? Well, the justification is called justice. They killed someone. You can't kill someone and then say, well, I can't kill anybody else, so you can't kill me. You can make an argument in that regard, but you killed someone. Justice requires a penalty. Then we get into the argument whether we're going to go right to life or whether we're going to, or sanctity of life, I mean, or whether we're going to go to lex talionis. So his argument makes sense. Once I've incapacitated a murderer, he can't kill anymore, so he's not a threat to me, therefore he can't be a threat to society. But does that mean I no longer have a right to execute judgment, to execute him? And that's where we get into our discussion as to what's legitimate and what isn't legitimate according to the law. And just because the law says we can doesn't make the law right. Slavery, women are property of men, yada, yada, yada. We've been through this all semester. So his argument is simply called the analogy of self-defense. If someone no longer has the capacity to hurt me, what's my justification for killing him? It's built on capacity argument. But that's not the only argument for the death penalty. It's called justice. If you've killed someone, perhaps we have a right to take your life as well, if you believe in lex talionis. Any questions about any of these three? Are you going to get all this right on the quiz? I realize a lot of lecture today. I'm just running off at the mouth. One of the arguments for the death penalty is called the cost-benefit analysis, utilitarian argument. It takes about $3.5 billion to kill someone on death row. Why?
Because of the appeals and the
hearings.
Go ahead.
The hearings.
Security? Well, that's minimal though, because anyone who's locked up, the same security is you're going to pay the same cost for security. It can be like $11,000, or depending on what state, $11,000 to maybe $20,000 a year just to house inmates in the house.
I was just going to say that to house inmates in the house.
It's all equal in that regard, so that's not costing anybody any more to keep someone on death row.
Does it have to do with pharmaceutical costs?
No. No, because you do the same thing for any inmate who's in there. They do have a right to that.
Well, I mean, for the administering of the whatever it is.
No, that's a couple of dollars.
In regards, well, aside from housing, but it's also the length that they're going to be staying on death row. The time.
That's part of it.
Time on to allow due process to happen.
That's part of it. Anywhere between 4 and about 20 years. California's got the longest, I think, and Texas, and maybe Florida's got the least. And we take that long because what's the second part of Gregg versus Georgia? Separation of trial and sentencing. And number 2 is, that's the cool down period is the first one. What's the second one? Appeal. How badly do we want to let the innocent prove their innocence? It's not about killing the guilty. I mean, the death penalty is about killing the guilty. But we know that there are innocents involved in that. There's 163 of them. How badly do we want to protect the innocent, not kill the guilty? And so it takes a while to get their appeals through the system. And again, we have no idea how many innocent people we've executed. We know 163. We haven't since 1976. And that's why it takes this long, and therefore it costs more. To house you, it'll cost about half of that for your life, on average, 40 years incarcerated. So you actually save money if you don't kill them. So the cost-benefit analysis argument we can prove statistically is an invalid argument. Now some people would say, well, wait a minute, I can save money another way. There's what we call frivolous lawsuits. Everyone who goes to jail, prison, has a right to file a lawsuit. So 80% of them are what we call frivolous lawsuits. So a frivolous lawsuit is you write to the judge and you say, I don't want crunchy peanut butter, I want smooth. And the judge gets that in the chamber and goes, okay. I don't want pink line paper, I want yellow line legal paper. And the judge goes, okay. Because those are kind of irrelevant lawsuits. There are very relevant lawsuits that need to be addressed. So we assume that half of these are frivolous. So I can cut lawsuits down to 40%. But now in regards to the death penalty, what did I just do to the time the innocent has to prove themselves innocent? I've just cut their time in half. Now I've also cut the cost in half, and so it's now equitable between the death penalty and life without parole. So what's at stake is not the cost. We want to make it the cost. Well, I don't want my tax dollars paying for it. No, you'd rather have your tax dollars paid to kill innocent people who haven't committed a crime? Which takes us back to the Kantian argument. How valuable is a human life that hasn't committed a crime? How badly do we need to kill the killing people, who obviously can legitimately be argued should be put to death, but in the process we're taking life off the planet that doesn't deserve to be sacrificed for the sake of the death penalty. I'm not saying you can't have the death penalty. It's always the innocent that hang in the balance. And by the way, I gave you six types of murderers, and I left one out. Someone in the class yesterday said, I never thought of it. So how about mass murderers? Never thought of it, so that's now added to the list, and I took off the suicide by cop people because they're really not murderers anyway.
Once the case is up for appeal, what's the time limit on an appeal?
Well, it just goes on and on and on and on.
Right.
Goes on and on and on and on. And the reason the court, that's a great question, Jada, and the reason the court decided that in Gregg versus Georgia is because we know we have an imperfect justice system. And the court favors, go back to the abortion module, life over death. And guess what? There's no solution to this. This half will be over here, and this half will be over here. Used to be 87% wanted the death penalty. It's down to 54 to 57% now. What if it shifts? We may still decide we want the death penalty. Now, let's try this as a possible solution, then I'll let you go. What if we employed the death penalty where the death penalty was deserved? Terrorists. Mass murderers. I'm not endorsing this, I'm just giving you an alternative way of looking at it. Serial killers. I can make a very strong argument. If anyone's going to receive the death penalty, it ought to be that three groups. Premeditated people are going to do it once and probably never do it again. Life without parole on a desert island. That's an alternative. Passionate killers, of course, they don't intend to kill, so they're out of the mix. So maybe we can have a compromise or a balance. Maybe some people really do deserve it. Other people, you ever hear or see the movie The Birdman from Alcatraz? I think it had Clint Eastwood in it a long time back. It's a guy who committed murder. Became an expert in what we call Aryan biology, bird biology. Became an expert, wrote books. People still use his books. Doesn't mean we should let him free. Say again? Yeah. Wrote books, became an expert in it. Yeah, well, you know, Alcatraz, what can I